Maybe there are some people here who think they know better than Arabs and Muslims in the region about these two organizations.
Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, leader of the Iranian opposition in exile, the Islamization of the West, demographic replacement. Is this something that concerns you?
And I warned the Europeans many, many years ago that one of these days it's going to be in your own backyard. And guess what? It is not in your own backyard. You can come to a country as a guest, and instead of assimilating and respecting our values and our culture, you're dictating to us that we should now practice the Sharia law in Europe. They'll end up like Iran pretty soon. Nothing good came out of this so-called Sharia law.
The massacre is exceptionally brutal.
Unprecedented in modern history.
36,000 dead.
A regime so desperate that it massacres its own people, that it has to import over 5,000 militias that are not even Iranian nationals, from Lebanon, from Palestine, from Afghanistan, from Iraq, to do the dirty job and Iranian people on the street. That the media doesn't talk about.
What is it that you would actually like Western governments to do in practice?
Number one, come to our help to equalize the playing field for us by taking out and neutralizing the element of repression that the regime is utilizing. That includes the IRGC or any other instance.
So you're advocating for an armed intervention?
Number two, economic strangulation, freezing of their assets and repurposing that towards helping the Iranian people. Expelling their diplomats, closing their embassies, going after them legally and prosecuting those who have been criminally responsible for these acts of crime against humanity. Making sure that Iranians are not disconnected from the world, so access to internet and information is critical. And ultimately be ready to recognize a transitional government that is the legitimate answer, because this regime is on the verge of collapse. It's just a matter of time.
My name is Stefan Tompson. I'm the founder of Visegrad24, and today I'm here with Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, the unofficial or official, to some people, leader of the Iranian opposition in exile. Reza, what a pleasure to be here with you.
It's good to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for your time. We're meeting in very specific circumstances. There has been an insane crackdown. The massacre is exceptionally brutal. Tell us about what is happening to Iran and what it feels like from your perspective.
No words can describe the degree of violence that has occurred. The minimum numbers that we have had was over 36,000 people just in the Tehran area. The numbers could be wider. They don't just end with killing people on the streets. They chase them into hospitals. They finish them off on their hospital beds. There are over 40,000 people who've been arrested, more than 300,000 wounded. Women are being raped in jail. It's really atrocious in terms of the level of violence that has been utilized. Despite that, Iranians are still resilient. They've been chanting slogans from the rooftops every night since that massacre. You have seen a wide level of support for them in the Iranian diaspora worldwide, from Australia to Canada to here in Europe. And everybody is up there backing each other up and supporting each other in this revolt. I mean, we are right now at a state where we are dealing with an occupying force, and everybody is hoping that the world will come to the rescue and deliver us in terms of, a sort of a humanitarian intervention that is necessary. This is the only way that we can find an opportunity to actually rise against a regime that very unfairly has all the advantage of repression, and only the world can help us by equalizing the playing field for us. So everybody's awaiting some action to be taken sooner rather than later to save lives, in reality, to have less casualties in our struggle for freedom.
Some of the videos that have been emerging from Iran are absolutely horrific, including a video that particularly moved me was a video of IRGC forces driving a car and literally driving over protesters. Now, these videos have been proliferated on social media, mostly on X, where we've had Iranian diaspora members and dissidents and people who stand against the regime who have been the voice of the people of Iran. What is very marking to me as I watch your struggle and the struggle of the Iranian people against the Islamic regime is that the mainstream media has been broadly silent about the scale of this crackdown. You've just said the figure 36,000 dead just in the Tehran area. Now, the war in Gaza attracted mainstream media attention for 2 years. Tens of protests in every single capital city, every week, every Saturday, hundreds of thousands of people coming out. Why is the mainstream media, in your opinion, not as interested in the plight of the Iranian people as they were in the plight of the people of Gaza?
Indeed, social media has been key to report back to the whole world what's happening on the streets of Iran. And unfortunately, mainstream media has been practically absent from it. Is it because maybe it doesn't fit their narrative in some way? Is there a double standard going on? I leave that to the public opinion's judgment, but clearly it has been quite absent from describing something that has been unprecedented in modern history. Over 30,000 people in less than 2 days being murdered. And yet it seems like that's not a big enough of an issue for mainstream media to cover. And at some point they'll have to be accountable in a way. Not covering such a tragedy is either complete ignorance or worse, almost like playing to the regime's hand and its instrument of propaganda that has always been masking all their dirty work. A regime so desperate that its total darkness massacres its own people. A regime so desperate and weak that it has to import over 5,000 militias that are not even Iranian nationals, from Lebanon, from Palestine, from Afghanistan, from Iraq, to do the dirty job and kill Iranian people on the street. That the media doesn't talk about. I think many Iranians like me are quite frustrated by what should be the most obvious thing for a reporter to do is just to report the news. Hopefully they'll catch up to it and, wise up to understanding that it is a moral obligation to cover this. As a journalist, you could not be oblivious to this level of genocide.
There have been a number of protests organized by the diaspora. Some very moving images outside of embassies, the lion and sun flag flying. Every time I see it, I get slightly moved. My family was in exile. I'm half Polish, and my family was also in exile. So your plight is sort of familiar to my family story in and of itself. So I find it emotional from that perspective. The diaspora is bringing attention to the horrors happening in Iran today. What is it that you would want the Western world to do to actually help the Iranian people? Telling the story is one thing. Getting the images out is something that even people like me can do. But what is it that you would actually like Western governments to do in practice?
When you have leaders beginning to take a very strong stance, example, Chancellor Merkel, that talks about this regime having lost complete legitimacy. Well, when a system becomes illegitimate, then you have to, by the same logic, say, well, what is therefore legitimate? Is it the aspiration of the Iranian people that finally needs to be acknowledged? Because for 40 years, the West has, in essence, conducted a foreign policy of appeasement with the hope that somehow this regime will change its behavior and will become reasonable enough to come to the negotiating table and stop its strategy of unleashing radicalism and extremism and terrorism regionally and beyond. That hasn't happened. Meanwhile, we are where we are today as a result of a regime that has always been thrown a lifeline for 4 decades, and to this day haven't shown any resemblance of the ability to transform itself into something other than what it is. And it cannot, because as I say, what they are doing is in their DNA. They are not compatible with the democratic free world that respects human rights, that values individual liberties, that protects the right of minorities, religious, ethnic. This is a regime that has basically been there only to export an ideology at the detriment of the Iranian people and against the interest of the free world. So when we look at the free world, what do we expect them to do? Number one, you can certainly help us by making sure that Iranians who are defenseless and unarmed vis-a-vis such level of brutality come to our help to equalize the playing field for us by taking out and neutralizing the element of repression that the regime is utilizing. That includes the IRGC or any other instance.
So you're advocating for an armed intervention?
That is a humanitarian intervention, because the instrument that kills people on the streets can no longer be tolerated by the world. And it's not the first time it happens. I mean, sometimes wars ended on the result of intervention of that nature. Example, Second World War.
Sure.
You know that very well as somebody from Poland. Number two, economic strangulation in terms of any revenue that the regime is utilizing to fund and keeps its war machine going on. Freezing of their assets and repurposing that towards helping the Iranian people in their various campaigns, from labor strikes and others, for instance. Expelling their diplomats, closing their embassies, going after them legally and prosecuting those who have been criminally responsible for these acts of crime against humanity. They can also do more in terms of making sure that Iranians are not disconnected from the world, so access to internet and information is critical. And that will be an instrument that will be of tremendous help for us in every phase of the game. And ultimately be ready to recognize a transitional government that is the legitimate answer to the aspiration of the Iranian people against a regime that has lost complete legitimacy. These are the kind of tangible steps that I think the world can take to help us. And at the end of the day, they will realize that this is in fact not just because it's good for the Iranian people, but it's good for their own interests as well.
One of the things that is misunderstood perhaps about Iran is how influential that country is in the Middle East and what role it has played, including in the Israel-Hamas war. The Israelis weren't just fighting against Hamas, they were fighting against a number of proxies. Could you tell us more about the role that Iran plays as a destabilizing force in the Middle East?
Well, again, the regime trying to establish its modern-day Shiite caliphate and export it to the world is using a lot of its proxies to conduct that. So whether it is their support for Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis, for instance, and all the way to European soil and even the Western Hemisphere, having terrorist organization or having sleeper cells that are funded by structures that are directly linked to Khamenei, the supreme leader, targeting, for instance, British citizens on British soil.
Could you give us some examples, Reza, of the operations that Iran has carried out in Western nations to destabilize Western nations?
Well, in fact, I presented in detail the whole mapping of the structures and institutions that are disguised as so-called foundations or centers that are directly under the authority of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, who operates on European soil, in this case in Britain, and how they're targeting British citizens, the Jewish community, journalists, dissidents, and what have you. And they have that spread out. That's not even before we start talking about the money laundering operations that they also have. And a lot of it, again, ties to the IRGC and why the prescription of the IRGC keeps popping up as one measure that needs to be taken. That's a subject in itself. But these are the kind of ways that the regime so far has conducted to undermine regional stability and, by its proxy war, achieve two things. A, create that instability that they thrive on, but also to deflect attention from themselves. Every time there was an issue, they would deflect attention either to Syria or to Lebanon or to Gaza or to Israel or to any other thing, to deflect attention from themselves. That has been a tactic that the regime has used for decades.
There has been some claims, and allegedly there is evidence that would link the IRGC and some of the gangs that operate in Europe, even on the basis of sort of armed robberies, drug dealing. Is this something that you're aware of, Reza?
They've extended that all the way to Latin America. I mean, part of the connection that the regime in Tehran had with Caracas and, of course, also with Cuba has been one of those axes that a lot of people in Venezuela could tell you about. The footprint of the IRGC all the way in the Western Hemisphere. And this is not something new. Some of the attacks that were carried out against, let's say, the synagogue in Argentina, that was another operation that was launched by the regime, again, targeting the Jewish community. There are so many examples over the 4 decades that you can demonstrate the pattern of behavior. And this is not just an incident. This is actually part of their entire strategy to intimidate the region and keep all of us hostage in the process.
The United States of America in several states has moved to ban and designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a proscribed terrorist organization. The European Union has been stalling on declaring both the IRGC and the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorist organizations. Why do you think that Europeans are stalling on this, especially given that a large selection of majority Muslim countries, including the UAE, Jordan, Saudi, Egypt, have designated and prescribed the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization? Why is Europe stalling on this?
Maybe there are some people here who think they know better than Arabs and Muslims in the region about these two organizations.
Is that it? You reckon?
Can I find another answer to the question?
I don't know. Perhaps they're being, I don't know, bribed, corrupted, or perhaps they're incredibly naive. I'm not sure.
Well, I think it's at the end of the day some degree of naivete, not understanding the scope of what it really means. Because, a lot of people that have not been direct witness of the level of atrocity or radicalism and extremism and hatred and bigotry and that exists, that is embedded in that ideology, would not comprehend it unless they spend just a day of living in Iran to understand what is really going on, how this ideology is poisonous, it's toxic, it's beyond radiation if you had a nuclear meltdown. It is that devastating. And I think that you are beginning to see the consequences of that radicalism and extremism manifesting itself now on European soil itself. That level of extremism, of radical Islam, is beginning to be felt in Europe. And I warned the Europeans many, many years ago that it will eventually end in your own backyard. I remember a conversation I had with a member of the House of Lords in the early 80s. And I said, the way Europe looks at the Middle East is like a far distant area. It doesn't affect us. They're fighting each other over there. And I remember telling him, this is probably 1982, that one of these days it's going to be in your own backyard. And guess what? It is now in your own backyard. And unfortunately, there's a certain angle of thinking here, mostly the leftists. The minute you say that, they say, oh, you're Islamophobic. Do you think that people in Saudi Arabia or in the UAE or in Iran, when they talk about radical Islam, they are Islamophobic? They are Muslims. Can't you tell the difference? And when you call something for what it is, you've been accused of painting them the wrong way. That's the kind of hypocrisy and double standard that exists. But the reality is that, yes, the Muslim Brotherhood or the Islamic regime are fomenting extremism, radicalism, hatred, bigotry, and discrimination. That's the essence of their ideology. What we want as Iranians is a country where we can guarantee every single citizen of Iran, irrespective of their ethnicity, their religious beliefs, or political affiliation, justice and equality under the law, putting an end to any form of discrimination that this regime has been the root cause of. And it's not just us being affected, it's affecting many others around the world. That is not the direction to go. And it is, for us, when we look at the West, what do we look at the West for? We're not looking to Beijing, we're not looking to, we're looking to the West. Why? Because these are the established democracies where we assume these liberties and these values are in fact cherished and protected. But why is it that when it comes to countries like ours, all of a sudden, it's no longer a question of human rights, it's a question of, well, maybe they think differently, maybe we should try to understand them. This is what they were saying at the beginning. Let's try to understand them. They may be different. We have to be able to believe in that. I'm sorry, but bigotry is bigotry. Radicalism is radicalism. You cannot discriminate discrimination.
It's the Karl Popper paradox, the tolerance of the intolerant. One of the things that really marked me over the last few months was seeing a poster of the Supreme Leader, the Ayatollah, held by a leftist in a keffiyeh at a demonstration in London, and the poster that she had said, "Be on the right side of history." What stage have we reached if we've got these radicals who side with the Islamic regime over and above the protesters that are being massacred? How do you feel about what some people are describing as the Islamization of the West? There has been wave after wave of mass migration. Many of those have come from majority Muslim countries. Do you think that warning that you issued to that lord in the 1980s, is that coming true in terms of demographic replacement as well? Is this something that concerns you, of sort of losing them as ideological allies? Is this something that you're concerned with?
Well, I would hate to see a scenario whereby we will settle for things have to get worse before they start getting better. In that light, let's say, for instance, that you are one of these Western countries. Mm-hmm. I will use one example specifically only because there's a reason I'm bringing this up. Belgium, let's say. So I know this gentleman who actually wrote a book about Iran, who is doing some research as well as some teaching, and he was telling me that my apartment is 1 mile away from the Royal Palace in Brussels. Yet in my own district, there are some Islamists that are pushing legislation to conduct not only the Sharia law, but to segregate buses so women and men ride in separate buses. In Brussels. Now I ask you as a European, have we come to a point where this country says not only you can come to a country as a guest, and instead of assimilating and respecting our values and our culture, you're dictating to us that we should now practice the Sharia law in Europe and incorporate it into the system? If that's the way Europe wants to end up like, then honestly, I'm lost for words. If that's where we have to get to that point. What I'm telling you is that Iranians, and I know many other countries in the region, are desperate to liberate themselves from this extremism, from this radicalism. That nothing good came out of this so-called Sharia law. Because in the name of Sharia law, the first thing that Khomeini did was to undo what the previous regime had brought in terms of equality, women and their rights with the family law plan. That was the first thing that they abolished. And then everything took a downturn. This is the consequence of a regime that was advocating Sharia law. We know how disastrous it's been. Just look at Iran and the state of affairs there. And now you think that's just a good example to follow for Europeans? Because they'll end up like Iran pretty soon. The writing is on the wall. And all you need to do is to ask the people who have actually endured it to tell you what it actually means. I don't want the Europeans to end up being where Iranians are today only to discover what it actually means. I'm just trying to save you time. But if you insist on that, so be it. But then you have only yourselves to blame.
Reza, as we come to the end of this interview, we've talked a lot about facts. But you are an Iranian. You are the son of the Shah. You are the Crown Prince. You are one of the main figures of the Iranian opposition. What do you feel when you see these images coming out of your home country? How does it feel to be in exile away from your people as they face this great tragedy?
Well, you know, it's not that I like to live in exile. I was forced to live in exile. I wouldn't be alive today if I were back in Iran. They would have eliminated me, and I'm not good being dead to anyone.
No.
So it was a matter of survival. But the nation is not calling me. They're calling my name. They want me to lead this transition. They have faith in me. They have trust in me. They know that for 47 years, I stood the course. I stood committed to my values. I told them that's what all I want for Iran is to have a secular democratic system to replace this religious dictatorship. Iran and Iranians deserve better than that. A country with such level of history, such level of culture, such level of talent. I mean, look at the world today. Yes, many Iranians had to be forced to exile as well or migrate. Most of them are running the show in many of these countries as successful entrepreneurs, doctors, scientists, and they would have preferred to do that back home. But their only crime was they were either Jewish or Baha'i or Muslims or maybe a member of the LGBTQ community or even atheist, and they couldn't be in their country as a result of immediate persecution. That's what I say. Iran deserves so much better, and we proved it before. Iran was there. Iran was one of the most successful growing economies in the Middle East. Other countries will come to take model out of Iran. The Korean delegations would visit Iran. From other countries, they will visit Iran. Our GDP was 5 times that of North Korea at the time. Today, we've become South Korea. We can't even compete with the first 150 economies of the world. Although we have gas and oil, Iran and its potential. That's not what Iran deserves to have. And as an Iranian, you know, I'm passionate about, and I'm not talking about blind nationalism. You know, we are in a real world. We like to be able to be friends with our neighbors. We have that kind of relationship so long as it's based on mutual respect and, you know, fair trade. But I think Iran can do so much better, and we've proven it before. And I know we can do it 10 times better if only the opportunity is given to us. And I think the opportunity will come soon because this regime is on the verge of collapse. It's just a matter of time. What can expedite its collapse is for the world this time to take strong stance with the Iranian people and help us bring together a regime that has been no good to anyone but only its own survival, and is willing to do anything, including killing tens of thousands of people just to survive. This cannot fly anymore. So as an Iranian, we'll do whatever we have to do. And I'm the first one to tell my fellow compatriots, we cannot rely on anybody else than ourselves. However, it will be so much better with less loss of life and much faster if indeed the world decides to this time stand on the right side of history, meaning on the side of liberating a nation that deserves better, and against an evil ideology that has been so destructive at home and abroad. This is what's at stake, and this is a moment in time where history can change for the better. So as Iranians, we will be fighting our fight. We are not waiting for America or Europe to do anything. We're just telling them, why don't you think of Iranians as your best partners post-regime? We will be there to make sure that the world is a safer place. We will be there to make sure that there's an immediate end to radicalism and terrorism and nuclear threats and whatever else that the world is preoccupied with. We'll be able to provide an opportunity for our nation and your country to flourish and benefit economically, to have a better future for our next generations. We'll be able to provide Europe with the security of energy dependence that right now is only being controlled by Russia mostly. Iran can provide Europe with this energy. Iran can reverse the trend of migration and more migration as a result of the status quo continuing that will already flood an already saturated Europe and what have you. Plus, we will eliminate all this radicalism that is now affecting European communities as well. And so on and so forth. There are so many more things at stake here than just talking about the principle of liberty. Nobody disagrees with that. But for God's sakes, let's cut the double standard and the hypocrisy. This is your opportunity to tell the Iranian people, we're with you and not against you. That's our expectation in a very pragmatic way. And we will remember. We will remember who was with us in these hard times and who wasn't. It's as simple as that.
I wish you and the Iranian people all the very best. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.